In 1973, a young director with one modest hit to his name walked his script for a space opera around Hollywood. United Artists passed. Universal, the studio that had just financed his previous film, passed. Disney passed too, which, given what happens later in this story, might be the single most ironic rejection in film history. The director was George Lucas. The script was Star Wars. Only one studio said yes, 20th Century Fox. And even Fox wasn't betting on the film itself. The studio boss later admitted he didn't fully understand the concept. He was betting on Lucas, hoping to keep him as a director for future projects. Star Wars got an $11 million budget, which even by 1977 standards was modest, a shoestring production compared to the era's prestige pictures. Here's the number that makes the gamble land. That $11 million film went on to gross $775 million worldwide, a return so large it's still used as a case study in nobody actually knows what's going to be a hit. So how does one rejected script become an empire spanning 9 mainline films, multiple spin-offs, and a growing slate of prestige television? The first expansion was the obvious one: sequels. The Empire Strikes Back in 1980, Return of the Jedi in 1983, together forming what we now call the original trilogy, though at the time nobody was thinking in trilogies. Lucas simply kept going because audiences kept showing up. Then came a 16-year gap. The prequel trilogy, The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, arrived between 1999 and 2005, filling in the story of how the Republic fell and Vader rose. It split fans sharply at the time, but it did something structurally important. It proved the Star Wars story could expand backward as well as forward, and that audiences would follow it there. The next leap wasn't creative, it was corporate. In 2012, Disney bought Lucasfilm outright for $4.05 billion as cash and stock, announced with barely any warning. Lucas, by then the sole owner of the company he'd built, stepped back and became a consultant. That single deal is the hinge point of this entire story. It's the moment Star Wars stopped being one filmmaker's universe and became a studio's flagship franchise. Built to expand continuously rather than occasionally, the results came fast. A new sequel trilogy, The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker, landed between 2015 and 2019, with The Force Awakens alone grossing over $2 billion. Alongside it came standalone spin-off films. Rogue One, telling the story of how the Death Star plans were stolen, and Solo, a young Han Solo origin story that underperformed and quietly signalled that not every corner of this universe would print money automatically. And then the format itself changed, twice. The first shift actually happened under Lucas himself, years before Disney was involved. The Clone Wars animated series launched in 2008 and ran for the best part of a decade, telling stories in the gap between the prequel and original trilogies. It was the franchise's first real proof that Star Wars could sustain ongoing television storytelling, not just occasional films. It was followed by Rebels, then, after Disney had taken over, by The Bad Batch, a direct Clone Wars spin-off following a squad of genetically altered clone troopers navigating the fall of the Republic. Fan favourite stuff, and a good example of the animated side of this franchise being every bit as essential as the films, not a lesser sideline. The second shift was the live-action pivot, and it's worth naming what each of these actually did rather than lumping them together. It all started with The Mandalorian in 2019, the show that launched Disney Plus itself and proved a Star Wars live-action series could actually work. Across 3 seasons and now a feature film, The Mandalorian and Grogu, in cinemas since May 2026. It follows a lone armoured bounty hunter and the small green creature he ends up protecting. Its whole style leans hard into the spaghetti western, Sergio Leone's 1960s Italian westerns, all silent gunslingers, dusty frontier towns, and moral ambiguity, a genre Lucas borrowed from for the original films too. It's arguably the single most loved piece of modern Star Wars, and the show every live-action series that followed owes its existence to. Andor is a prequel to Rogue One. It spends its 2 seasons tracing how Cassian Andor, a small-time smuggler with no interest in politics, becomes the rebel who dies stealing the Death Star plans. Its origin story as slow-burn character study rather than fan service, and it's widely considered some of the strongest writing the franchise has produced. Ahsoka brought a character out of animation and into live action for the first time. She started as Anakin Skywalker's Padawan back in the 2008 Clone Wars series, survived the purge that killed most of the Jedi, and carried on through Rebels, so by the time she got her own live-action show in 2023, set roughly 5 years after Return of the Jedi, she arrived with over a decade of built-up history most casual viewers had never seen. Obi-Wan Kenobi does the more straightforward job of connecting two eras directly, set about 10 years after Revenge of the Sith. It fills the gap between the fall of the Jedi at the end of the prequels and the moment we meet an aged, exiled Obi-Wan watching over young Luke at the start of the original 1977 film. The Acolyte and Skeleton Crew pushed the format further still. The Acolyte jumped back roughly a century before the prequels into an almost unexplored era, playing more like a mystery thriller. Skeleton Crew went lighter, a family adventure about kids lost off their home planet, unlike anything before it. Both show the franchise experimenting with genre and tone once committed to television, rather than repeating the same beats film after film. Between the animated wave and this live-action one, nearly 2 decades of continuous storytelling, now spanning genres from war drama to family adventure, Star Wars went from a saga told in theatrical installments once every few years, to an ongoing, always expanding universe with new stories arriving on a near constant basis. And nowhere does that expansion show its potential better than a minor character who was already dead. Boba Fett appeared in barely a handful of scenes across the original trilogy, memorable mainly for his silence and his armour, before falling into the Sarlacc pit in Return of the Jedi, and by every reasonable reading of that scene, dying there. For decades that was the character's entire story. A cool design and an anticlimactic ending. Then the Book of Boba Fett in 2021 did something risky. It retconned his death, had him crawl out of the Sarlacc, and put him through a story that could very easily have felt like a cheap resurrection. Instead, it worked. He's found half dead in the desert by Tusken Raiders, taken as their prisoner, and slowly earns his way into their society, eventually becoming one of their own leaders before that chapter of his life ends. It's a genuine, earned redemption and transformation arc, built entirely out of a character who, on paper, was already finished. And rather than keeping him the stoic, wordless bounty hunter of the films, the writing gave him a dry sense of humour that the character never had a chance to show in his 3 minutes of original trilogy screen time. It's one of the better examples of what this kind of ongoing, expanded universe is actually for. Not just more content, but genuine room to take a character the films never had time to develop and give them an arc that could have gone badly wrong, and instead became one of the franchise's better surprises. But the deeper reason this story took hold in the first place goes right back to that opening setting. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, sounds like pure escapism, as far from human history and mythology as a story can get. It's actually the opposite. George Lucas has said Star Wars was directly shaped by Joseph Campbell's The Hero with a Thousand Faces, the study that traced a single recurring hero's journey structure across nearly every human mythology, from Greek epics to Arthurian legend. Campbell himself, after finally watching the films, called it a valid modern myth built on that ancient pattern. The setting did real work here too. The dogfight sequences were storyboarded against real Second World War aerial combat footage. The Empire is visually and thematically coded on Nazi Germany. Lucas has spoken about Vietnam-era power imbalances shaping the Rebels versus Empire dynamic. None of that is hidden by the setting. Far, far away, strips out the specific cultural and religious baggage a story set in, say ancient Greece would carry, while keeping the human history and mythology fully intact underneath. It's not a story with nothing to do with human history. It's a story that used distance to smuggle nearly all of it in. So in answer to why this became an empire, is not because it was rejected at first and nobody understood it. That's a good hook, not the actual answer. It's not Disney's budget either, though that certainly helped. And it's not even the original story and Lucas's vision alone. though that helped too. The real answer is Lucas and his team's ability to take that original story and pull it in genuinely different directions most franchises never attempt or simply aren't capable of. The Empire wasn't built the day Fox said yes to an unproven director with a strange space script. It was built every time, for the 50 years since, someone was willing to take that story somewhere it had never been before. If you enjoyed this one, hit subscribe for more of these, and a like genuinely helps the channel more than you'd think.